Well, someone wants to know all about the ballistic performance of monometal, meaning all copper bullets, as compared to traditional bullets. We're going to cover that today, as well as address some questions about old Savage rifles that didn't pan out quite the way it was hoped. And somebody is asking about restoring Model 70 rifles. Stay tuned. We're going to see if we can figure it all out on this episode of Ron Spomer Outdoors Podcast. Now, we are going to be talking about somebody trying to fix a rifle that did not work out so well. Maybe he should have done this before he tried the Gunsmith that he did. And this gentleman is one of our patrons. His name is Max, and he says, "Hey, Ron, in reference to the gentleman who was talking about the Savage 1920 bolt-action rifle, I have a story about that particular model of firearm. During my last year of college, I was interrupted by the COVID-19 epidemic, so I was sent home to finish my last semester. Well, during that time, we all got our COVID stimulus checks, and I, being interested in firearms, bought my first two rifles, a Savage Model 1920. Well, two of those. One was in a 250 Savage and the other a 300 Savage. Boy, those are a couple of classics." Max continues, "As I live in an anti-gun household, I had to smuggle them inside in the early morning hours and hide them under my bed. But I was so excited. I didn't fire them as they were 100 years old and I couldn't afford to take them to a gunsmith at the time. Well, fast forward to 2021, and I had gotten a job with the U.S. Forest Service out in Salt Lake City area. So when I moved out west, I took my rifles and I found a gunsmith," he puts quotes around that, "to do a safety check and repair to these two rifles to restore them to their former glory. Well, 2 years go by with no word from that gunsmith. Eventually, he tells me that they are ready to be picked up, but then he charges me twice what we'd agreed upon. An argument then ensued, but in order to get them back, I had to cough up the extra money. So I was thoroughly irritated and at this point more interested in a Weatherby Mark V rifle. So I decided to sell those rifles on GunBroker so as to never have to deal with old rifles with unforeseen issues again. I managed to sell them to a gentleman, but alas, the story doesn't end there. On the morning of my wedding day, I got a phone call from the guy who bought those two Savage rifles from me to say that the 250 Savage doesn't headspace correctly and the bolt itself is all chewed up. This is why I put the quotation marks around gunsmith. I then chose to be a good sport about it all and pay for the repair myself, as those rifles were advertised as being restored, repaired, and safety checked by a competent gunsmith. The rifles were absolutely beautiful, and I was inspired to buy them after I saw a video on YouTube about them by a Canadian gentleman who referred to that particular model as the Baby 1903 Springfield. Well, I no longer have any interest in collecting old firearms, but at least that'll leave some more out into the wilds for any other collector who wants them." Well, it's kind of a sad but interesting lesson learned story here. Sorry about that, Max, but this is me scratching my head because my buddy Steve had similar issues. He's down in that Salt Lake area, and he had a gunsmith working on his and had all kinds of problems getting the work done on time, getting it done properly, and it ended up being quite the mess, too. So I don't know. I guess that means be careful about who you find as your gunsmith. And I'm suggesting you guys try out this Midwest Gunworks because they don't have just one gunsmith there, but several. I don't know exactly how many, but it's kind of a consortium. And I like that idea because quite often, you might have a good gunsmith, a competent one, but he doesn't know everything. Another one may know more about Savage than he does about Brownings or Weatherbys or vice versa. When you get a group like that, you get a little bit more synergy and they can help each other out, and I would think it would work a little better. Also, you can get a gunsmith who's just a little bit maybe lackadaisical or tired of the work, and his buddies can sort of egg him on and buoy him up a little bit, perhaps. I know that works in different work environments. So something to be said for that. You might want to try out Midwest Gunworks. They not only sell parts, but they do the gunsmithing as well. All right, let's see. We've got somebody else here who is a patron. This is Tony. He said, "Hey, Ron, I love your show. I want to understand monometal bullet ballistics. What caliber of a monometal bullet is the most efficient in terms of external ballistics and terminal performance? Would this be a 6.5 or a 6.8 or a 7 millimeter or a 7.62 or which one? And how would 80,000 psi of pressure affect your answer? And what weight bullet? I've got elk hunting on my mind. Well, I wrote back to Tony right away and said, hey, Tony, caliber doesn't really matter so long as the bullet's muzzle velocity and ballistic coefficient are the same. So let's say we've got a .612 BC bullet in 264. That would be for a 6.5 millimeter cartridge. And we launch it at 2,850 feet per second. Well, that bullet is going to scribe the exact same trajectory, and that's drops as well as wind deflections, as a .612 BC .284 or 7 millimeter bullet, or a 308 bullet, or even a 458 bullet that are launched at 2,850 feet per second. As long as all those bullets of those different calibers have the same ballistics coefficient rating and the same launch velocity, they're going to shoot exactly the same. Then I continued. The difference will be that the larger, heavier bullets will carry more energy, and they'll also hit you with more recoil. 80,000 psi will merely add more muzzle velocity to a given bullet from a different barrel length. Does that make sense? So you can clearly kill an elk with a 50 grain .224 inch diameter bullet if you put it in the heart, or a 500 grain 470 bullet to the heart. Bigger bullets will kill not much faster than smaller bullets if expansion and mushrooming are equal and said bullets hit the right place. But the larger and heavier bullets do give you more fudge factor in that they touch more tissue and they usually penetrate more deeply due to momentum. More mass, more momentum. But they still have to damage the vital organs. A central nervous system hit, of course, kills regardless of energy, mass, diameter, etc. 22 rimfire to the brain or the spine does just as well as a 300 grain 375 H&H in the same place. Most hunters compromise with a middle ground, using a fairly wide, heavy bullet that they can deliver properly. This means that the rifle isn't too heavy to carry all day, it doesn't kick so much that you flinch, and it delivers bullets where you aim. Not too much drop, not too much wind deflection. The 300 Win Mag, now that represents a great middle ground, but a well-directed 28 caliber bullet of some kind, or even down to a 24, can do the trick. So as we always say, it's more about the bullet's placement and the type of bullet for good expansion and deep penetration. But the simple answer is the ballistics don't change so long as your muzzle velocity and your ballistics coefficient are the same. You're going to get the same ballistic performance. Terminal performance, yes, that will vary depending on the weight of the bullet. Good question, though, Tony. That's good stuff to know. So thanks for sharing that. Now, here is another patron, Richard. He says, Ron, I have recently become the owner of a 1953 Winchester Model 70 in 300 H&H Magnum. You know, guys, back in 1953, that was the only 30 caliber Magnum in the world. As much as I can remember, if anybody has a different idea, let me know about it. But it seems to me we had your 30-06, we had the old 30-40 Craig and the 30-30, and then 300 H&H Magnum. That was about all the 30s that were out there until 1963 when the 300 Win Mag came out. Ooh, I take it back. 300 Weatherby. That one came out at around 1944 or so. 300 Weatherby Magnum. And that was, gosh, superior ballistically even to the 300 Win Mag, but it wasn't as available, which is why the Winchester Magnum took over as the 300 Magnum. But the 300 H&H is still a pretty darn effective little Magnum. So let's just find out what Richard's got going on here with this new 1953 Winchester Model 70. I was not particularly looking for it, but one gun dealer knows its customers, and if you're a regular patron, well, they'll show you something special. After watching the videos of your friend Steve's ordeal with his Model 70 and 300 H&H, I was very skeptical. However, the price was right, and the extras that accompanied that rifle, well, it was just too good of a deal to pass up. I took it out, and I shot it, and it was grouping at 30 yards, 3 shots touching. At 100 yards, it shot just over 1 inch, and I'm not the best at shooting off the bench. Now, I have a rifle I want to restore as close to original as possible. Most gunsmiths I know are really good, but their specialty is not pre-64 Winchesters. Do you have any suggestions or recommendations for that specialty? I have looked at a couple online, but the opinion of an accomplished gunwriter such as yourself would mean the world. By the way, don't let anyone discourage you or from your old profession of writing. I enjoy your blogs. Thanks for what you do, Richard. Well, Richard, appreciate that. And thanks for reading the blogs. If any of you are interested in my old writings, of course, there's all sorts of things out there in the old magazines and a few books and such from the back in the day. But I do write now on the blog, and we've got, gosh, honey, how many blogs are on that site? Close to 400?
No, over 500.
Whoa.
But we want to publish all your old stories in different decades.
Ooh, yeah, that's right. You started that project.
We have it already. It's just you haven't done your part.
See, Betsy's always looking out for me, guys. She doesn't want me to be spending my time running around town, going to bars and having fun, you know. So she makes sure I have plenty of projects to keep me on the ranch.
So if people want to hear or read your old stories, let us know, and that might nudge Ron to do some editing and put them together.
Yeah, guys, if you want me to keep my nose to the grindstone, let me know if you want me to put a book together of all my old stories, or at least the good ones. We'll figure it out. Oh, boy, that and the 30 caliber book that I'm plugging away at slowly when I'm not doing these podcasts every other day. Well, let's get back to Richard and his problem here. He's looking for somebody who can restore Winchester pre-64. Guys, the pre-64 Winchesters are kind of a big deal because so many people wanted well-made custom guns with controlled round feed actions. So you've got a couple of major choices there, which would be, of course, the 98 Mausers, and then the Winchester pre-64 controlled round feeds, especially in the 80s and the 90s and even before that, from 64 on. Because in 1964, Winchester went from the controlled round feed to the push feed style. Still great rifles, and they were quite accurate, but people who wanted the controlled round feed had to get an older 64. So the gunsmiths were paying top dollar to get these, and quite often throwing the barrel away and even the stock and just redoing the whole thing as a fancy custom. But quite a few of them were also just simply restoring. Now, a lot of these old Winchesters really don't need to be restored, except for that they look a little old and battered. Still work pretty darn well. And my buddy Steve, that Richard mentioned him here, he has 4 or 5 pre-64 Winchesters. I think he's got a 243, 270, 30-06 at 300, Win Mag, and there might be one other. And he just restores them himself, meaning he'll do the stock work. And that's a great project for folks who like to do things, fix them up on their own, got a little spare time and whatnot. But if you don't feel comfortable with it, you can find somebody to do it. Now, who's going to really do good quality? And do you also need some metal work, bluing or anything like that? Well, the two who come to my mind as the best of the best, Stephen Dodd Hughes over in Livingston, Montana area, and then Doug Turnbull, who's up in like the Niagara Falls area, up there in that corner of New York or northeast Pennsylvania, I believe is where Doug is. Now, I think Doug is retired, but his operation is still going, and he's got quite a staff of accomplished gunsmiths and restorers there. They just really do remarkable work. But I'm imagining there are plenty of others around the country, individual gun makers, custom gun makers who might work on a project like that. If any of you know some good ones to recommend, send that information in. We'll read those on our next podcast. So good luck there, Richard. But if you look up Stephen Dodd Hughes or Doug Turnbull's operation, Turnbull Manufacturing, I think you're going to see some really remarkable work. Those guys just are experts. All right. Oh, hey, this is just a fun, uplifting letter from Wesley, another patron. We met him at the elk camp with Tate Bradfield's elk camp at the Day Mountain Ranch here in Idaho last summer. And Wes is just an enthusiastic young man, and he's coming out to do his elk hunting, and he decided to throw a bear hunt in with it. We were visiting back and forth, and I said, man, if you're coming out to go to the wilderness on a backpack elk hunt, you might pick up a bear tag too, because there's plenty of black bears wandering around out here. And so he's getting all excited. So he wrote back and he said, hey, much appreciated. And thanks for the good wishes. I'll need all the luck I can get. I just purchased my tags and licenses yesterday. I did decide to pick up that black bear tag. I've been reading this Ultimate Guide to Black Bear Hunting by Douglas Bose, B-O-Z-E. I don't know that one. But apparently Wesley does, and he likes it. He says, Bose has an entire chapter and several hunting stories dedicated to calling bears. If I'm going to lug a Fox Pro through the wilderness, I ought to capitalize on any opportunity it affords me. I don't know why he's hauling a Fox Pro electric caller through the wilderness, but that's what he says. I am excited to hear about your .338 Federal rifle build mentioned in this morning's podcast. Hopefully you plan on a deep dive on that rifle and its load, optics, and any accessories. I do, sir. We will be doing that for you. He continues, I have been using an AR-10 chambered in .338 Federal on whitetails for several years now, and I am convinced that it is the best close-range, low-recoil deer killer out there. My bullet of choice has been the 210 grain Nosler partition at about 2,400 feet per second from an 18-inch barrel. It's mild but adequate in the Upper Peninsula's woods. If you're planning on trying the really light for caliber hammer bullets or the 160 grain TTSX, any terminal ballistic testing would be of interest. I'm looking forward to your next digital campfire, by the way. Hunt honest and shoot straight, Wes. Now, that is an enthusiastic young man who's just you're really into it. You can tell by all the details he goes into here. He's thinking about it, debating it, considering it, doing his research. I just hope, Wes, that you have a great, successful hunt. And by that, I mean you have a wonderful time whether you get something or not. That is a successful hunt. And, man, when you're out in the wilderness with a rifle and a couple of tags looking for game, whether you find it or not, it's going to be a great experience. Mine always have been. Well, maybe not when the blizzards hit and it snowed and rained for 6 days, but all part of the program. Okay, let's see. This is just from somebody who was watching one of our YouTube videos on my 30-06. Done several of them. And he said, Ron, the 30-06 is like aspirin. If it were invented today, it would be considered the latest, greatest wonder drug. Well, I don't know about that, Robert, but it is a pretty great all-around cartridge. It's kind of impressive to think of this way back in 1906, guys. 1906, that was only a couple of years or so after the Wright brothers got up in the air. And that's a pretty amazing story that they were able to fly. Just think all the years and years of human history when people wanted to fly and dreamed of flying. And these two simple bicycle mechanics from Ohio get the better ideas, study birds in flight and whatnot, all that, figure it out for themselves. And at that time, the experts that they were studying to figure it out had the wrong information. These two figured it out for themselves and were able to fly for the first time. Wow. And this 1906, the 30-06 comes out, and it's been hanging around as well as we've been flying ever since. So it really is quite a remarkable cartridge. You know, it's lost its luster. You got all these new cartridges, especially with the long bullets and the fast twist barrels, and the 30-06 is just kind of falling by the wayside. And when I say this, a lot of people get upset. But guys, I'm not determining what's happening here. I'm just sort of noticing it. As they say, don't shoot the piano player. That doesn't mean the 30-06 is obsolete in its performance. It will always be what it's always been. And of course, with today's bullets and powders, it's even faster than it was originally, and we all know that. It came right out of the blocks, proving itself on everything across North America and Africa and everything in the world, really. So it still does that. It's just that it doesn't go as fast as the 300 Weatherby Magnum, the 300 Win Mag, the 300 Rum. There's just lots of different options out there. But it still hangs right in there, so nothing to complain about. I don't know if it would be considered a miracle drug, but it's certainly got things going for it. Now, here's a quick one Betsy added in. She just scribbled it down here. It's from Ben. He says, hey, regarding that 35 Remington you did a video on, you are just copying the boys from Vortex at this point. Love you anyway, Ron. Well, Ben, appreciate the love, man, but actually I'm not copying the boys from Vortex or anywhere else because, believe it or not, neither Betsy nor I spends our time watching other people's gun videos. Every once in a while we'll bump one up, especially Hootie. I've been in several camps with Hootie Who, and nice young man, so I'll occasionally watch some of his stuff, but we're just so darn busy around here. In addition to the podcasts and the videos we do and the blogs that we write and maintaining the website and the Patreon site and newsletters and all this stuff, we've got a ranch to run. Not a working cattle ranch, it's a working wildlife ranch. We're trying to maintain and improve habitat for wildlife here on a fairly good sized spread for a couple of older than 20, shall I say, folks. And we're off the grid as well. We've got to maintain that. We've got gardens for our food. We put our firewood up. And boy,
Ron,
am I making enough
me
excuses?
Tired.
We should probably break off and take a nap. Okay. At any rate, we're not copying anybody, but it doesn't surprise me that we're producing the same stuff because we will sometimes notice people will say, hey, I saw somebody copied you on one of their YouTubes. Well, it's not really necessarily copying. It's just that we have only so many topics that we can cover, and the 35 Remington compared to a 30-30, that's kind of a no-brainer. So sorry if we did the same thing that Vortex did, but it kind of proves that great minds think alike. Hey, guys, I got some news for you. I'm going on a bear hunt in Alaska, grizzly bear. They have got so many bears in this one area, at least one area that I know of, that they are allowing non-residents like me to get 2 grizzly bear tags and 5 black bear tags because the population of caribou and moose has been just wiped out by these predators. They're so successful at it now for some reason, and they've been fighting it for years and years and years, and they just figure they have got to reduce these populations of predators. I can't afford tags for all that stuff. I'm just going for one, but I want to check it out and see just how many bears there are running around out here. I hunted in this area years and years ago a couple of times, fished it as well. Betsy's going along. We're going to do some fishing and stuff, but what knife am I going to take along? I'm shooting a Park West Rifles Model 97 that they're building for me, weatherproof, synthetic stock, all that good stuff. But when I'm thinking of knives, gosh, I love this set from Diamond Blade Knives, which has custom walnut handles on here from the stock of my 7x57. Beautiful knife, but I don't know that I want to drag this into the mud and snow and grizzly country and possibly lose it or anything. So I think I'm not going to take this set along as much as I'd like to. I think I'm going to go with a similar rugged, dependable, waterproof, synthetic handled adjunct to my Park West rifle, and that would be the G10 handle on this Knives of Alaska. This is the Ron Spomer knife, so it's got my logo and my mug on there. If I lose it someday, somebody might find it out there in the tundra and say, hey, Spomer was here and he lost his knife. But I think this will more than do the job. Of course, I'm going to be with a guide. We're going to be with Bushwhack Adventures, and they've got some great guides based on who I talked to at the show when we booked this hunt. I was really impressed with these young guys. So I think I'm going to be in good hands, and they're going to have plenty of knives. I'm sort of just going to be joining in on the skinning and the cutting up of the meat and all. But yeah, I think I'll take good old rugged Knives of Alaska, Magna Cut steel, and we'll see how it does on grizzlies. And I'm going to see if I can eat some of that grizzly meat, because I'm thinking they might be feeding fairly heavily on berries up there, and that might be pretty darn good. Well, here's another one Betsy wrote down from Garth. Ron, I would hardly call you a geezer. You're an inspiration to us.
Well, if you're a geezer, then I'm a geezerette.
See, that's
I don't like that term.
Let's make some T-shirts. Geezer, and then I'll have an arrow pointing over to you. It'll say geezerette. Geezer and geezer. Well, appreciate that, Garth. Yeah, I'm not really a geezer, but boy, the young guys often call me one. Definitely a fud. They always call me an old fud. But I remember when I was
we're just getting started.
Yeah, we're just getting started. We're working hard toward geezerhood. I tell you what, when I start talking like this, I'll be a geezer. And I expect you all to listen very carefully, because I'll start to lose my volume. No, I remember when I was in my 20s, somebody over 30 I thought was getting pretty old, but somebody over 60 was a geezer. Okay, one more down here yet in fine print. Reg Sparks says, I don't see Joseph here. I'm not sure which video he was referring to.
He was
but
referring to you being a geezer, and he was talking about Joseph wasn't there.
Oh, Joseph wasn't in the geezer group.
I know, he was a whippersnapper.
That's because Joseph's not a geezer yet. Geez, he's just a whippersnapper. He's got to work his way up to geezerhood.
Hey, the other thing is we have hired a whole bunch of young guys. So we have different generation perspectives.
Yeah. And I'm liking that because those guys will bring up some aspects of guns and shooting and rifles and fit and anything else that I don't necessarily think about. And they kind of open my eyes up to different perspectives. And I think that's important because we want to cover this stuff for everybody, every age group, every sex, every whatever, whether you're a hunter or not as much the target shooters. We're just not hardcore long-range precision shooters or precision bench rest shooters and stuff. We're taking this from a hunter's perspective, but still, it's nice to get some feedback as to why stock lines they are for these target shooters and things like that.
Plus, they're a lot of fun.
Yeah, they are a lot of fun, and they take a little bit of the workload off of us. All right, let's go to Iowa, where we hear from Ben, and I think we heard from Ben last time. No, this looks like a different one from Ben. He says, good afternoon, Ron. I recently picked up a CVA Scout in 35 Whalen to use on whitetail in Iowa. In 2022, Iowa updated the regulations to allow any center fire cartridges with bullet diameter between .350 and .500. That's a 50 caliber. And a muzzle energy higher than 500 foot-pounds. That's pretty low. So it is no longer a straight wall only state. From my research, the 35 Whalen will give the best trajectory of the allowed cartridges with widely available factory ammo options. What are your thoughts on the 200 grain Hornady Superformance load? On my chrono, it averaged 2,973 feet per second, and I have consistently grouped it at 0.9 inches at 100 yards. My concern is if this load is pushing this specific bullet too fast, to the point that it will just blow apart and fragment when it hits a deer. Would it be better to go with one of the heavier 225 or 250 grain bullets and sacrifice velocity, or go with a 180 grain Barnes Vortex at a similar velocity? Well, I tell you what, in a 35 caliber, with that bullet weight, on a whitetail, you don't worry about anything. That bullet might be fairly soft, but boy, once you get your caliber size up to that diameter, breakup isn't really a big issue. I don't think you'll have any problems. But if you want to go to the 180 grain Barnes Vortex, I of course will stand behind that. I love those copper bullets and the consistent expansion that they get without losing any weight. You'll shoot right through with that. You'll do a lot of hemorrhaging damage. I just think it's a great option. But if you want to go heavier, that'll work too. Really, once you've got a 35 Whalen in your hand, pretty much any bullet you stick on it's going to do the job. So good luck with that, Ben. Those are some strange regulations in Iowa. Somebody explained to me what the heck those people are thinking. I mean, allowing a 35 caliber at the low end up to a 50 caliber in a state that used to be just limited to shotguns only, and then I guess they went to straight-walled cartridges only. The idea there is that you minimize reach, I guess. They think like a 270 or a 243, it just flies too far. Whereas most deer hunting, of course, your bullet hits the ground a lot sooner than if you were launching it in the sky 3 miles or something silly like that. But the heavier bullets, when they hit the ground, are more likely to ricochet. So it seems to me they would be more dangerous. I mean, I would rather say, gosh, if you're concerned about a bullet flying thither and yon, a little bit uncontrolled and such, I would want to be shooting the lighter bullets that would break up more easily when they strike something, or lose energy more quickly when they struck something downrange. But I don't know. I just own a big old 50 caliber bullet bouncing around out there. It doesn't make any sense to me. All right, let's go to South Dakota, where they have a little more reasonable take on this stuff. They've been shooting regular rifles there forever, and I don't think they have any more issues and problems than Iowa might. Gary says, greetings and salutations. Now, I don't get salutations very often, so thanks for that, Gary. Well, concerning the great old 257 Roberts, you caused me to think old-timer's disease was coming to roost in my brain. In your video, Mystery Deer Cartridge Disappearing, you claim that the bob is a short action, question mark, question mark, question mark. I had to look into that as soon as possible, and I'll be darned. The overall length comes in just under 2.8 inches. Still confused, I looked up the dimensions of the 757 cartridge. That's the one they used to make, the 257. And it is just under 3 inches. Then I noticed that the 257 is loaded with light short bullets, while the 757 is generally topped with longer, more aerodynamic bullets. Well, I guess I'm thanking you for keeping my brain somewhat active. On a light note, I am generally with you and some of the more seasoned folks in thinking some of these newfangled cartridges are interesting, but I believe there's a vast untapped area of revisiting older cartridges to find out all the available potential hidden in them. Exploring higher pressure in suitable rifles, improving your rifling twist rates, modern bullets and powders, etc. Again, thanks to you and your crew for all the basic and fantastic information. You all are very much appreciated. Well, thank you, Gary. We appreciate that, and we appreciate you writing in and diving into these numbers and discovering for yourself exactly which cartridges qualify for being short action. You know, this is kind of a tough call because there's no absolute on short action. The way this happened was, back in the day, cartridges were just cartridges. 30-30, that's a pretty short cartridge. 30-06, well, that's now known as a standard length cartridge. And then the belted magnums, like 375 H&H kind of started it. That's a little bit longer, so that got classified as a magnum length cartridge. But then there really was no clear definition of what makes a short action a short action. And the .308 Winchester comes out as a shortened version of the 30-06, essentially, for the military. And it happens to come in at 2.8 inches cartridge overall length, be about like right here. And that got sort of accepted as a standard because the idea with the military was to have a rifle action scale down to fit that. You're shaving weight off as well as increasing speed and things for more efficiency. And that became kind of the standard. So over time, different rifle makers started building short-action rifles. Winchester Model 70, for instance, was always your standard length 30-06 action. And when they went to a .308 and a .243 after that, those short actions were fitted in the same actual long action. Quite a few years before they actually started shortening the darn things down to handle short-action cartridges. Remington jumped on that bandwagon a lot sooner. And then they had their magazines, pretty much the internal magazine set up so that you could only fit a 2.8 or slightly longer cartridge in the magazine. It would still work through their short action, bolt action, but you couldn't shove those cartridges down into the magazine box if your bullet stuck out a little bit too far. So that kind of set the standard at 2.8 inches. But the 757, the 257 Roberts, the 6mm Remington, all of those made off of that 757 case, depending on how long your bullet is or how far you seat it out. If you're a hand loader, you could make it a little bit too long to work in a true short action. But guys are discovering all of this stuff now. Of course, these days with the long BC bullets, now you're getting new cartridges because that's a way to easily get around this issue. So you say, all right, we're going to stick with a 2.8, but now we're going to reshape the case itself so that you can seat those long bullets out, and your overall cartridge length will be 2.8 inches, fit inside of the magazine boxes and stuff, but your bullet isn't going to be shoved so deep in there that you're getting past the neck and shoulder junction down into the powder space. A couple of issues with that. One is, of course, your bullet shank is getting into the powder space, so you lose a little powder. But if you push the shoulder back to prevent that, you also lose some powder capacity in that case, but you no longer push the shank past that junction. And that's the concern for hand loaders. The brass starts to swell a little bit. You get what's called a donut, or a little bit of a ring built up around that junction. And if your shank hits that ring, it increases the pressure and the tension with which that bullet is held. And that can change the pressures in your chamber and cause problems along those lines. It gets to be a little bit technical, and if you don't handle it, you really don't need to worry about it. But that's why all the concerns and discussions about true short actions or not. All right, Robert from Montana. Hey, why no love for the 375 Remington Ultra Magnum? I love mine, and with the 334 grain Lehigh bullets, it will reach way out there. Yes, recoil from a 9-pound rifle is rather wicked. I also have your 7mm book. Shot my biggest bull, I assume he means elk, since he's from Montana, with my 757 this past hunting season on the last day of the last half hour of the season. The distance was about 200 yards. Always enjoy your channels on YouTube. Well, thanks for that, Robert, and congrats on that last second successful hunt for elk with a good old 757. But as for the no love for the 375 rum, yeah, you're right. I don't love it. I don't know that I've ever even shot it. I use the 375 H&H. I've hunted with the 375 Ruger. To me, they're a little more efficient. They're more than enough power and everything else that I might want. So it's just like, why fool around with a big old 375 rum? But lots of people love that thing. And if you're one of them, more power to you. And anyone out there, if you are looking for sort of the ultimate 375, the Remington Ultra Magnum is a full Magnum length case, plus it's based on the 404 side Jeffrey case, so it's much wider than the belted Magnum style as used by Weatherby and Winchester and such. So yeah, you're going to get some horsepower out of that baby. I'm not so sure that the animals you take with it really notice a difference. It still comes down to the right bullet in the right place. All right, how about, here we're going to go to South Africa to hear from Peter. Good evening, Ron. My name is Peter from South Africa in the district called Mpumalanga. I think you had a few hunts in the district. I don't remember if we did hunt there. Can't remember where it was. I've hunted around East London, in the Cape, Eastern Cape several times, up toward, up into Umfolozi and Sluislui rivers up there. We've been over by Kimberley, but I don't remember if we've been to this Mpumalanga. Fun to pronounce if I'm getting it right. At any rate, let's find out what Peter has to say about there. He says, I own a Vector K98 30-06 with a Lynx 5 to 20 by 50 illuminated minute of angle at 20 scope. I've always used 180 grain bullets, moved over to cellular and below ammo, and I use it on blesbuck and blue wildebeest from 120 meters out to 300 meters. My question is, with all the 125 grain 30-06 ammo available, what will be the recoil as well if I use these 125 grain bullets on game the size of blesbuck and impala? Is it advisable to use this bullet on blesbuck up until, say, 200 meters max? Thanks for your amazing episodes and advice. I have learned so much, and I'm still learning from you. Thanks again for all of your knowledge. Well, you're welcome, Peter. I hope I can give you a little bit of knowledge on this one. I would say no issues using the right type of 125 grain bullet out on your 30-06 on both blesbuck and impala-sized animals. Gosh, I've taken blesbuck, impala. I've taken impala with a 223 Ram. I've taken blesbuck with the 243. Taken bushbuck with a 243. Plenty of people have used all that stuff. It's always that right bullet in the right place kind of a thing. Now the question is a 125 grain bullet in a 30-06 the right bullet? Some of those are going to be virtually varmint bullets, fairly frangible. But some of them could be an all-copper bullet and extremely hard and going to get deep penetration there. A lot of guys here in the last few years have tumbled to this idea of using the 125 to 130 grain bullets in a 30-06 and pushing them really fast for flatter trajectory. If you're hunting in an area that does not have a lot of big winds, not a problem. Enjoy that extra velocity and extra reach. But as far as terminal performance, I think you're going to do just fine. I wouldn't hesitate to use those on that size animal up to, wildebeests are pretty tough. I don't think I'd use it on a wildebeest. They're just a solid animal. Even though the black wildebeest isn't all that large, he's just so tough.
They gotta stay away from the alligators. I mean, crocodiles.
Stay away from the crocodiles.
Well, I mean, they're tough. They have a lot of...
Oh, that's why they're so tough.
Yeah, they got a lot of...
Yeah,
a lot of things that are going to eat them.
Yeah, they walk for hundreds and hundreds of miles while leopards and lions harass them, rip and tear, and then they have to jump across some of those rivers where the crocs grab them. And yeah, it's a tough life. You got to be tough. But those are blue wildebeest, or a version of it. The GNU, G-N-U, GNU. The black wildebeest is in South Africa. They don't have the big migrations anymore. They were similar to bison over here in that there were huge herds of these things across South Africa. And of course, the settlers and farmers had to wipe them out because they would just sweep through their fields and eat everything, similar to what we did with bison over here. But now, of course, with all the hunting demand, they've come back big time on ranches, and there are now more black wildebeest scattered across hunting ranches in South Africa than there are in any of their national parks and stuff. But at any rate, I think you'll do fine with that, up to about your blesbuck-sized animals and impalas. So give it a try. Let me know how it works out for you. Betsy has hunted quite a lot with a 308 over there, but she's usually using 150 grain bullets, maybe 165. What did you take that last black wildebeest with, and that 308 you used? I think it was a Barnes bullet, wasn't it?
It was a Barnes bullet, but I don't remember.
It's either a Barnes bullet or a copper bullet from Norma. That one year you were using Norma ammunition. I think it was the Kalahari bullet. But at any rate, monometal bullets worked out great. So good luck with that one, Peter. How about Andrew from Nova Scotia? Ron, Andrew here from Nova Scotia, Canada. I'm considering the new Savage Arms Model 110 Trail Hunter Light. I think one of the guys at the elk camp last year had one of those rifles. I was really surprised by how light it was, and it shot like a house afire. He loved it. So I think you got a good one there. So let's see what else he says. He's going to use it for hunting black bears, whitetail deer, and possibly moose, if he ever wins a tag. My question is, what calibers do you think would be best suited for this rifle? All models have a 20-inch barrel, and I'm thinking about the 6-pipe Creedmoor, the 30-06, 7-rem mag, 708 Remington, 270 Winchester, 308 Winchester. Your opinion would be greatly appreciated. I also enjoy your podcast. Well, enjoy this one because you're on it. Andrew, what do you want to get that thing in for maybe a moose? You know, any of those are going to work. Obviously, the 6.5 Creedmoor is kind of the puniest of the bunch, but plenty of people have taken moose with 6.5 Creedmoors. It seems crazy to some people, but it just works darn well. And 30-06, of course, is proven 7-rem mag, no issues there. Personally, oh my gosh, I don't know what your ranges are. In Nova Scotia, to me, it strikes me that you've got some fairly tight cover. It's not like you're shooting out in the wide open tundra. If your shots are going to be limited to 300 yards at max, you can easily get by with it 7mm 08 Remington or the 308 Winchester. But if you really want to reach a lot farther, you're going to have some advantage in the 7-rem mag. But boy, you pick any of those and you're not going to have any issues, really. So you might want to consider which one you can get ammo for. I'm guessing all of those are pretty available in your area. So if that's a concern, just think, well, where can I get most of my ammo? And what options do they have in bullets? You're going to want a pretty serious, tough bullet for the moose. So make sure you can find a load that has either one of those all-copper bullets like the Barnes or something like Nosler Partition or the bonded bullets, any of that type. And then I think you just need to get out there and draw that moose tag. That's the hard part. Ask Betsy.
I did not get my moose tag again, even though I have a moose I already picked out, but
She's
no
got
tag.
a moose. She just doesn't have her tag. The moose is right out that window. Thank goodness they haven't hit the garden and the orchard yet. They're usually about 600 yards behind the house in a little basin back there. Gosh, I could have shot those moose last deer season about 6 different days. They're just always back there. Oh, I hope they hang around till that tag comes ripe. I don't know if I'm holding my breath on that one, Betsy.
I'm going to keep trying.
All right, let's go back to South Dakota again, and now we have Linda. Ron, I couldn't help but notice the Frank Heidelbauer waterfall calls hanging on your wall. Hey, cool. They brought back many fond memories of calling ducks and geese in the 70s and 80s. I'm sure most people today wouldn't know the history of those fine calls. Well, thanks for noticing that, Linda. I moved them over to the other end of the walls. These are the Heidelbauer calls, and they are really spectacular. It's quite a story. The calls aren't nearly as spectacular as was the gentleman who made those. And he made these for me as a special gift to a friend. I did some stories on Frank Heidelbauer. He was from the Sioux Falls, South Dakota area, originally from Iowa. But gosh, way back in the early 80s, I did a piece for him. And then several years later, I did another. One of them was in Outdoor Life, as I recall. At any rate, he was just the consummate conservationist sportsman. Grew up on a farm, learned to call ducks with his voice, and when his voice changed when he was a teenager, he couldn't call them anymore, and so he started fiddling around to make duck calls, and then he made goose calls. He won the world's duck calling competition. He won a crow calling competition, and he hunted birds everywhere. And he was a pilot. He flew a small plane during World War II, crashed twice.
This is the best part.
Yeah, he came down twice. One of his jobs was to transport various majors and generals and whatever from point to point over what he called the Burmese hump in support of the Chinese against the Japanese in World War II. And he was flying a major into the hot spot and set the plane down. And Frank said, I don't think we should land there. It's too sloped and muddy. And the major said, you just fly the plane. I'll give the orders, kind of a deal. And he said, land that plane. They landed the plane in the mud, and it flipped over and broke this guy's 2 broken legs, compound fractures, as I remember the story that Frank told. And it was raining and muddy, and Frank and some other soldiers dragged this guy into a foxhole, and the fighting was hot and heavy, and they laid in that foxhole all night, and the major said, Frank, you've got to get out of here and get help. And Frank said, well, I can't leave you here. Too dangerous. And the guy said, well, I'm not going anywhere with these broken legs anyhow. We're just sitting in this foxhole. No, you've got to go get some help. So Frank sets off. And he marches for days and days to get the heck out of there. Has all kinds of crazy adventures. Eats grasshoppers out in the field. And, I mean, it's just unbelievable. He makes it. Another time he went down because the mechanic didn't tighten the spark plugs or something on his engine. He's flying along, and all of a sudden it starts to sputter, and he loses one cylinder and another or something until he's gliding down, and he tries to set it down on a river gravel bar, and the gravel pieces turn out to be about the size of a Volkswagen, and he manages to drop over one and put it on the ground, but before he can stop, both wings hit 2 more big ones, and it flips him over, and he's hanging upside down, and he says, my biggest fear was to be burned up, fuel, where you crash, you could burn. I didn't want to die by fire. So in my panic, I pushed my release button on my harness, and the only injury I sustained from that whole episode was falling on my head. And again, he has to march on out of there for days and days to get back to civilization kind of thing. So when he got home, he went back to the farm in the quiet life in the fields of Iowa and then South Dakota, hunting ducks and pheasants and just enjoying God's creation the way he wanted to. And what a gentleman he was, just Mr. Enthusiasm. He always had the enthusiasm of a teenager. He always wanted to learn more things and do better, and he made his own fishing lures and rods and duck calls and all sorts of stuff. So these are his calls. Curly maple with a nice flair to it, but his parts, this was the secret. While World War II was going on, we were inventing all sorts of new synthetic materials, plastics and different things, and he experimented with those so we could find materials that would give consistent call sound without changing, without breaking. He always called it, you don't want your call to break. You want to hit it hard and sound like a mallard hen calling very loudly in the big open windy country of South Dakota. You want to reach out, but you don't want it to break and go like that. So Frankie could really blow a duck call. At any rate, he helped raise hundreds of thousands of dollars for Ducks Unlimited. He started chapters all across the Dakotas. I don't know if he went into Minnesota, if he was in Iowa, mostly South Dakota. And then he would donate one or more of his calls at the conventions that people would bid on, and they would be bidding hundreds of dollars for these calls. He was just in big demand. So that's the kind of sportsman that just makes all the rest of us look good. If we could live up to even a little bit of something like Frankie did, wow, would we make more progress. And it was folks like Frankie in that era, that World War II generation, that did so much for conservation. Prior to that, of course, Teddy Roosevelt and all those guys started this whole conservation movement. They ended market hunting and gave us this whole idea of sportsmanship and limited harvest and respecting the resource and protecting it and building it up again and fighting against the rapacious stripping of all the natural habitats and that kind of thing. And then that World War II generation came back from saving the world from Nazis and everything else, and then they went to work on similar projects, and we were the beneficiaries of that. I can remember when I was a kid in the 60s, Canada geese were pretty hard to come by in South Dakota. You get a limit of one kind of a deal. But we were so successful with our refuges and our waterfowl production management areas and reintroducing giant Canada geese here and there, and suddenly they went from a rare trophy to golf course nuisance. But those are the kinds of successes that hunters have brought to this entire sphere of wildlife in North America, and it's just a wonderful story. And guys like Frank Heidelbauer were a major part of it. So if you guys ever have a chance, just dig into it, do a little research. His grandson took over. Frank lived into his 80s, and his grandson learned how to make these calls on the same equipment, and I think he's still making them, still in Sioux Falls. So just look up Heidelbauer game calls and see if you can't pick one up, because they are just one outstanding representation of the waterfowl caller's art. All right, Linda, we want to thank you for bringing Heidelbauer up. That was a treat. Scott from Stillwater, New York. How much bullet energy is too much? Well, when it hits you, you'll know. Loaded question, yes. I have taken a number of whitetails with the 257 Roberts. The farthest one went 30 yards. I've also taken them with a 280 Remington, a 6mm Remington, 308 Winchester, and even the 358 Winchester, most with shots being well placed in the vitals. The 257 Roberts never passed through but seemed to dispatch the deer quickest. I do understand bullet type and various aspects of reloading to know that there's a lot that can make a difference. Your thoughts, please, on energy and why the 257 seems so effective. These questions and answers to them will bring out so many conversations and debates, shall we say, so as to make, they're going to bring those to many hunting tables and camps. So thanks for all of the topics that you cover so well. Scott. Yeah, Scott. That's the big mystery question. I'm sure someone out there is going to say, I used the 257 Roberts and all my deer ran off too far and I had a hard time recovering them and I never thought it worked very well. There's just no absolute answer on this. I used the 6mm for about 10 years or so. And one of the first stories I ever wrote was on my experiences with that 6mm in a 788 Remington, inexpensive little bolt action rifle that really shot well. And I took whitetail, mule deer, and pronghorns with it, coyotes, a lot of those, and a few foxes and jackrabbits and stuff, and great little round. But most of the deer would take the shot and run off a ways and fall over, like you said, with your 30-yard run on that one. I consider a 30-yard dash upwards to 100 yards pretty normal with anything I make a chest or heart shot with. It doesn't seem to really matter what the caliber was or how fast it was going or anything. Now, sometimes those really fast ones would give me a chest shot that just went bango. Oh boy, hydrostatic shock. But the next time it wouldn't. What happened to the hydrostatic shock? Over the years, I just learned to expect the animal to do what he's going to do. But you put that right bullet in the vitals and you're going to get that animal if you can track them and recover them. If they flop down right there, great. If they don't, no big deal. It's just kind of typical stuff. But you're saying that you found the 257 to be the best. I haven't heard which bullet you were using. As you suggested, that's going to make a big difference. A harder bullet's probably going to zip through and you won't get that dramatic impact sort of a thing. A more frangible bullet, sort of expands internally with various fragments and tears more tissue. So you would get more damage more quickly. I've had some really dramatic stuff with 243s and 6mm that way. So I really don't have an honest answer for you. It's just one of those kind of mystery deals. The other thing, of course, is what was the condition and aspect of the animal you hit? Were they keyed up? Were they high on adrenaline? Or were they calm? Who knows? It's just really difficult to tell. I think the key to it all is do what you've been doing. Make your observations, and then make the adjustments and changes in both your cartridges and or bullets until you see the results you expect or want, and then stick with it until you see there's a reason to switch. I think that's the best most of us can do. Appreciate you weighing in on that, Scott. And for anyone out there who doesn't know the 257 Roberts, it was the 757 Mauser cartridge neck down to 25. It's one of the earlier 25s. It and then the 25-06 were kind of the big ones of the day, and the fastest one was the 257 Weatherby Magnum, and that one still is. The newest one is the 25 Creedmoor, so there's a little bit of a resurgence now in 25s. I sort of predicted this a couple of years ago. No big deal to predict that because mostly comes down to the manufacturers pushed the 6.5s until we got sick of them. And then they added a whole bunch of 7mm. The 30s were pretty well covered, so they went with some new 24s, and they got some hypervelocities there, and they got some efficient ones with long bullets like the 6mm Creedmoor, and they were ignoring the 25, so it just seemed like, well, this is the next one up, and sure enough, here we are. New long bullets for the 25s, and everybody's getting excited about them, which I think is great, because they really are great cartridges. I've always loved the 25-06. I've done a fair bit of hunting with the 257 Weatherby, and we just recently did a little bit of video on a 257 Weatherby Mark V classic rifle. Gorgeous walnut, high gloss, the ultimate 60s style Weatherby Magnum rifle in a 257 Weatherby Magnum, shooting 100 grain loads from Weatherby. They were going 3,666 feet per second. Holy mackerel, that is fast. So watch for that video coming up on Ron Spomer Outdoors regular YouTube channel. That's a fun one. All right, let's go to Norway. Stian, I believe you pronounce that Stian, Stien. At any rate, correct me if I'm wrong, but he writes, Mr. Spomer, thank you for your great YouTube content. I enjoy watching. Well, we enjoy having you. Thank you so much. I thought of two things today as I was looking at reviews of the new Mauser 25. It looks like a great rifle at a medium price. I have also held and felt it at the local gun store, and it feels like a competitive or maybe even a better alternative than the Blaser if you don't need the barrel change option. As I looked through the internet, I also came over a short video of you replying as to why there are fewer or no 7mm 08 cartridges in the European market. I have the same experience. The answer is short, though. At most gun shops, 90% of the market buys a 308 Winchester. In fact, several retailers have told me that they haven't sold any other ammo than 308 in months. If anything else, it's the 6.5 Swede. I have several different chambered rifles, and I bought 5 boxes of Federal Trophy Copper in 300 Win Mag at one of the largest retailers in Norway. I was told that the last time they sold this ammo was 2 years earlier. And it was to me. He's the only guy in Norway who's buying 300 Win Mag. That's pretty cool. So he says, I believe Europeans, or at least Scandinavians, are quite conservative in ammo selection. We use 308 for basically anything and everything between small game to moose. There you go. Well, that's interesting. Gosh, I'd heard recently that the 308 was pretty popular over there, but I didn't realize it was that popular. But yeah, it seems like you get regional choices in a lot of times. Like in Pennsylvania, they're going to use the pump-action Remington rifles were real popular in Pennsylvania. Not so popular anywhere else, but crazy there. And up in Maine, they used pump-action rifles a lot, as well as lever actions in heavy cover. And 30-30s were big in a lot of places, but in a few places they preferred the 32 Special or the 35 Remington. And then out west, you had your 270 fans. And then the 7 Rem Mag came in, and you had competing that one against the 300. But it seems like in the U.S., with our varied terrain, you go from the swamps and the hot hot deserts, up into the tundra and across the Rocky Mountains and the wide open plains and little farm fields and woodlots. There's just so many different habitats, and you can shoot short, long, and in between. There's good reason to have a broad selection. And a lot of us have the wherewithal and time that we can afford to travel to many of these different places, so we want rifles and ammunition that'll work well in those places. And I think that's why we probably indulge a little bit more in multiple selections, whereas folks over there in Norway and Sweden, they have similar habitats, I would suspect, and everyone seems to like the 308. It works well for them. Why mess with success? Thanks for writing in and sharing that with us. This is a JD from Texas. He's got some good advice for us. Old, but good advice. And I think a turtle once gave that advice. Slow but steady wins the race. Ready for a new wrinkle on the 308 versus whatever cartridge debate? Well, hello, Mr. Spomer. I just want to start out by thanking you for the immense knowledge and entertainment that you've provided all of your audience. Keep up the good work. Well, thank you for that. I will try with Betsy's help. He continues, I have a couple of questions that I hoped I could get your opinion on. Recently, I've been watching and rather enjoyed you and Mr. Von Benedict share your opinions on the adequacy of the 308 Winchester as an elk cartridge. First question, do you consider, in the hands of a skilled hunter, of course, the 300 Winchester Magnum firing a 180 grain nozzle partition to be an adequate elk cartridge out to 500 yards? I will go out on a limb and assume your response will be yes, considering this combination has been killing big game around the globe since the inception of the 300 Win Mag in '63. One of the thoughts that Joseph shared was that the 308 is not capable of delivering the heavier bullets at high enough velocities to achieve acceptable performance, and that at extended ranges, it can't do what the larger cartridges can. I agree with this statement, and it has resonated with me, so while perusing Federal's offerings, I found it odd that they carried a 308 Winchester loaded with a 175 grain terminal ascent bullet. I thought, surely the 308 can't push that bullet fast enough to do any good. Why did they load that? So down the proverbial rabbit hole I went. And what I discovered was shocking and a testament to the incredible efficacy of modern high BC bullets. The legacy 300 Win Mag elk load versus a modern 308 Winchester at 500 yards. Let's go to the tail of the tape, shall we? This guy's good. Federal Premium 300 grain Winchester Magnum load, 180 grain nozzle partition. The BC is .361. Muzzle energy, 2960 feet per second, 3,502 foot-pounds of energy. There's your velocity and energy. And at 500 yards, you still have 1,800 foot-pounds velocity and, 1,799 feet per second of velocity and 45 inches of drop. Doesn't tell us what we're zeroed at here, but that's okay. 10 mile, the drift at 500 yards, wind drift now, right angle, 25 inches, 25.3. So the remaining energy is 12,094. That's pretty impressive for 500 yards. Now we're going to go to that little 308. Is that going to come close? This one's the 175 grain terminal ascent bullet, great elk bullet. The BC on that is much higher, .520. Remember, the other one was .361. So that's going to make a significant difference, especially in the deflections. Let's just jump right to the deflection. What was the 10-mile-an-hour deflection was 25 inches on the 300. It's only 19.6 on the 308 Winchester. So you've got, that's because of the bullet, though, not because of the 308 Winchester. So what's our starting velocity is only 2,600 feet per second. So that's 360 feet per second slower than the 300 Win Mag. And the energy it puts out at the muzzle is 2627 instead of 3502, so a lot less energy. But what's remaining in energy at 500 yards is 1,292, only 2 foot-pounds less energy remaining at 500 yards. The 308 is hanging right there with the 300 Win Mag because of the bullet, guys. The bullet BC. For all of you who say BC doesn't matter, this gentleman is proving us wrong. And that's the wonderful thing about BC. You take a small little cartridge like the 308 up against, I just happen to have a 300 Winchester mag and a 308 on the table. So you look at the difference in those two. You go, how can it even come close? The BC makes all that difference, guys. You don't have to start off all that fast if you conserve that bullet's velocity by having a sleek bullet that doesn't drag. So I'm not going to go into the rest of this because I think by now we get JD's point, and he makes it very well. Choose the right bullet, and you can make those smaller cartridges with less recoil outperform the big magnums. But remember, if you would use that same bullet on the 300 Win Mag, you would blow the 308's performance out of the water. All right. Well, that looks like the last one we've got on here. I do want to read one more thing from JD. He's got a PS on the end of it. He says, although I do own a 308, my favorite rifle is the 7mm Remington Magnum. Oh, but I love to stir the pot on a good cartridge debate. I look forward to you and or Mr. Von Benedict's response. God bless you all. Keep up the good work. Well, you got my response. I don't know if Joseph, he's not around right now, but I will try to remember to tell him about this, but I think he's going to agree with me that you've discovered the magic, and it's that IBC bullet. And I really think that's just great advice for people who don't want a big magnum, don't want to put up with the recoil and everything. Just get yourself a more efficient bullet, and the smaller ones will do the job. All right. Now we are done. Anything else to add to this, Betsy?
I would do a comment of the week, and I would do it to, I can't remember her name, Linda. Linda on.
Oh, Linda on Frankie.
Yes.
You're the guy. Yeah. Linda from South Dakota talking about Frankie Heidelbauer and his duck and goose calls. And I want you guys to notice that whenever Betsy says, I think we need to do a comment of the week and award somebody with it, it's usually somebody of a certain age.
No, young. I like the young comments too. The 21-year-olds, 25-year-olds, but I like.
You like them all.
I like Frankie. I met Frankie.
You met Frankie. Isn't he a wonderful individual?
He was.
Just Mr. Enthusiasm and just good-natured and happy-go-lucky little guy. He always called himself the sawed-off little kraut because his father came over from Germany and never really spoke good English or anything, and Frankie would imitate him and chuckle about it and stuff. And, just self-deprecating humor. He was great at all of it. What a wonderful gentleman. Yes, let's give it to Linda. Linda, thank you so much for bringing up Frankie Heidelbauer and his wonderful duck and goose calls and all the great conservation work he did for us all. We are still benefiting from it. Whenever I go to South Dakota hunting, I figure if I'm hunting one of these waterfowl production areas, Frankie probably had something to do with protecting that area. In fact, there's one outside of Sioux Falls, right off the Interstate 90, that has his name on it. They dedicated that whole wetland to Frank Heidelbauer. Pretty cool. This is Ron Spomer. Thank you guys for all of your questions, advice, and I'll see you next time. Keep sending in that information and those questions. And, hey, somebody needs to chew me out. I didn't get taken down on this episode, so that's kind of disappointing. See you next time. Hunt honest and shoot straight.